and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. Well, it is lovely to be back with you all. If you haven't been here when I've been here, I'm Amy Iyer-Delavet. I'm the chaplain at St. Stephen's Episcopal School, and so it's just a delight to be back among you all, a parish of such warm and wonderful folks, hospitable clergy, beautiful choir, beautiful creation. So thank you for having me here. It's wonderful to be here. The last parish I served was an Episcopal church in Montecito, California, a coastal village tucked right between the Santa Ynez Mountains and the Pacific Ocean. This seemingly idyllic haven is famous for its concentration of wealthy residents. I say seemingly idyllic because the truth is, whenever you find a concentration of extreme wealth, you don't have to look very far to find people who are struggling to survive on the economic fringes. During my tenure as rector, a luxury resort opened right next door to the church. Rooms started at over $2,000 a night. They opened their doors in January, right around the time a very different kind of neighbor rolled into the neighborhood. His name was Paul. Paul lived in his little green pickup truck with a metal camper top for shelter. He cooked his dinner on a portable grill right on his tailgate. Paul didn't stay a stranger for long. He started coming to the church. He joined our adult education classes. He became an usher. And eventually, he was formally received into the Episcopal Church by our bishop. Paul described himself simply as a poor American. He had worked in construction his whole life. He'd even owned his own business at one point. But now, at retirement age, the bed of his pickup truck was all he could afford. Not everyone in the neighborhood took kindly to Paul. The luxury resort did everything in their power to get him removed. But because of the affordable housing crisis, the local laws against camping weren't being strictly enforced. Having a vehicle to sleep in was at least a roof over someone's head. So while some neighbors harassed him and threatened him, our church community stood by Paul. He was part of us. He ministered among us. And we defended him, advocated for him, and loved him. Before long, Paul came to me with a plan. He wanted to buy a used camper to live in. He had saved a third of the money himself. He had secured a loan from a parishioner for another third, and he was asking me for a loan for the final third. After talking over his plan, I gave him funds from the rector's discretionary fund. No need to pay it back. If ever he had funds to give to the discretionary fund, he could give freely and it would be passed on to someone else in need. It's the beauty of God's economy lived out through the rector's discretionary fund. Soon Paul moved into a pretty rickety camper and found a place to park it under a freeway overpass. As long as he moved it frequently enough back and forth from each side of the street, he was safe to park it under this freeway overpass. It was shabby, but it was a big step up from the back of the truck. And Paul was proud, and we were proud. Not long after Paul moved into his RV, some other new neighbors moved to town. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. They had just stepped back from their roles as senior royals and were making a new start in this secluded seaside refuge. Now, I was the rector of the only Episcopal parish in Montecito. And suddenly, the grandson of the Queen of England, the supreme governor of the Episcopal Church, formal title, y'all, was living in my backyard. Based on how the church system works in England, where every geographical area belongs to a specific parish, I realized that technically speaking, I was now priest to the Duke and Duchess. It was a situation I clearly had never imagined myself in. I don't think I had ever thought twice about the Queen of England being the supreme governor of the Episcopal Church. I'm sorry, of the Church of England, rather. So just to check my logic, I reached out to a parishioner who is from England and who happened to be related to a former Archbishop of Canterbury. It seemed like she'd be a good source of authority on this matter. She confirmed it. Yes, she said, you should absolutely write a note and hand deliver it along with a service bulletin to their home. Well, honestly, I dragged my feet. I wasn't terribly comfortable with my new role as rector to the royals. I've always felt much more at home ministering to those whom Jesus called the least of these. But finally, on December 23rd, the last day I could wait to reach out, it's really essentially Christmas Eve for priests because the 24th, Christmas Eve, is really when we celebrate the feast, right? So we've got a lot to get done on the 24th. 23rd becomes our sort of Christmas Eve. So finally, on the 23rd, the last moment, I set out to deliver their package. Handwritten letter, check. Service bulletin with a link to our COVID-era online Christmas service. Remember those days? Check. My young daughter suggested that we include a gift for their toddler. So we added Archbishop Tutu's Children of God storybook, Bible. And for the parents of this toddler, a really nice bottle of wine from a parishioner's vineyard. So it seems like a good Anglican mix, right? Give the baby the Bible, give the parents the bottle. As I was heading out the door, I grabbed the other gift I needed to deliver that day, a Home Depot card for Paul, so he could make some desperately needed repairs to his crumbling camper. And right there, standing at my door, the promise I made at my ordination echoed from deep within. To love and serve the people among whom I work, caring alike for young and old, strong and weak, rich and poor. Never in a million years could I have imagined what those vows would actually look like in practice. Bearing Christmas gifts to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex in one hand and to my homeless parishioner in the other. In today's gospel, Jesus tells us, whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me, the Creator. Whoever welcomes a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. Whoever welcomes a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones, truly, I tell you, none of these will lose their reward. When we listen to Jesus talk about these three groups, prophets, the righteous, and the little ones, our human brains naturally want to create a hierarchy. We think the prophets and the fiercely righteous advocates are the VIPs, the most important ones. We expect Jesus to finish his sentence by pairing prophets and the righteous with the wise and the holy. But Jesus pulls a fast one on us, as he so often does. He drops in the little ones, the most vulnerable, dependent members of the community, and places them on the exact same pedestal as the greatest prophets. He takes the person with the least amount of social power and says, this person matters just as much. Earlier in this chapter from Matthew's gospel, Jesus sends his disciples out on a mission with absolutely nothing. No gold, no bags, no extra clothes, not even shoes. They are completely, totally dependent on the hospitality of strangers. In Jesus' kingdom, vulnerability isn't a flaw. It is the whole point. It forces us to recognize our dependence on God and one another, which flies right in the face of our culture's obsession with independence and self-reliance, a mentality so often dependent on the illusion of the power of wealth. These three titles, prophet, righteous, and little one, aren't different classes of people. They're three strands of the very same rope, tightly braided together into what it means to follow Jesus. The prophet strand speaks God's truth to power. The strand of righteousness is the tireless pursuit of justice and healing broken relationships. And the strand of the little one reminds us that we are all ultimately vulnerable and dependent on God. And how do we weave these three strands together in our everyday lives? Well, Jesus tells us that the secret is in how we welcome one another. When Jesus talks about welcoming, he isn't just talking about being polite or throwing a nice dinner party, though we know Jesus liked a good dinner party and a good bottle of wine. He's talking about a radical kind of hospitality, a welcome that costs something. To welcome the prophet means standing with them when the powerful turn against them. To welcome the righteous means joining them in the risky work of justice. And to welcome the little one with a cup of water means binding our lives to theirs. That Christmas season, the gospel came alive on the streets of Montecito. God wasn't asking me to choose between Paul or the Royals. God was asking me to extend the exact same pastoral love, the exact same grace, the exact same holy welcome to both. Because in the eyes of Jesus, the palace and the pickup truck sit on the very same ground. In the eyes of God, we are all royals. Amen.